many years ago, but not too many years ago, Officer Latanza was one of you preparing for the sacrament and preparing to dedicate himself to his vocation, his calling as a Catholic, but also his later vocation in service, public service as a police officer. So I welcome you tonight to be with us. Some were asking today, I saw a few of you, what's the topic tonight? It's very important, and the reason why that I made sure that this topic was one of the last topics we covered before you're confirmed is because how critical I think it is in your young lives. And it kind of goes to a story that I maybe have told you before, but this happened many years ago. I was at Mariana's house across the street. It had to be about maybe 5-6 years ago, having dinner. And all of a sudden, a helicopter flew over. You're probably too young at the time, but a helicopter flew over the house. And Mariana's father, I said, well, what's that? He said, well, there must have been a car accident. They're landing at the high school, the helicopter. So I said, well, maybe it's someone who I need to see. Maybe I need to go as a priest, maybe offer a prayer for them, maybe anoint them. So I got there, and the police officer allowed me to go into the ambulance. And there in the ambulance was a young man who had just graduated from Mansfield High School. In fact, he was in the confirmation class, 9th grade, a few years earlier. And he had been shot during a drug deal for pot. And so I remember going in the ambulance. I anointed him, the anointing of the sick. And then as I left, and I'll never forget this, the helicopter blades were, like revving real high, ready to put him into the helicopter. All of a sudden, by the time I got back to the street, to the police officer that was at the street, the helicopter blades slowed down and stopped. And they said, we're not going to transport him because he's dead. And the thing that I'll never forget besides that image of that young man on a stretcher and the helicopter blades slowing down was when I was at his wake. His funeral was here in Mansfield. And people just kept saying, young people, not too much older than you, saying, but it was just pot. It was just pot. As if, it's no big thing. It wasn't, crack cocaine or heroin or hard drug. It was pot. And it was after that time that I really started, in my mind, saying we have to speak to young people. Not only about alcohol, because just alcohol would be the same expression, but that just pot, as if it is so common now that why would it even bother? Why would someone get killed for this? And yet it put him in a situation with other people, put him in a whole different place. And he was a young guy, just like high school kid, just like you. Had a whole future. Had a scholarship to Northeastern. Yeah. Now that maybe is an extreme story, but it's a true story. And tonight, I've asked Officer Latanzio to come and just speak to you as a friend, as hopefully I've tried to communicate that to you. We're more than just police and priest, but we're friends, very, very concerned about you. not trying to inhibit your fun, not trying to make your life miserable, but because we really do care. And the choices that you're making now, and certainly will be making in the years ahead, can be life-altering. And so I want to thank Bob Soltanzio for being with us tonight.
Thank you. All right, I'm Officer Latanzio. If you go to Mansfield High School, then you probably know me. You probably see me walking around the hallways. If you haven't, and you go to another school, just give you a quick background on myself. I've been working for the Mansfield Police Department for about 8 years now. From Mansfield, I went to the Mansfield school system, and now I work in Mansfield. So part of what I do is I try to educate young people on dangers that are out there. Now I could stand up here and I'm going to tell you not to do these things, but I'm going to give you reasons why. So I'm just not going to stand up here and say, don't do this, don't do that, it's illegal, and you're going to get arrested if you do these things. I wanted to start out the presentation by showing you guys a short music video. I figured you didn't think you'd see a music video when you come in, but I'll show it to you. It's about, it's on drinking and driving. So you're all going to be driving pretty soon, getting your permits, learning how to drive. And there's going to be a lot of temptation and peer pressure out there. That's one of the major things we're dealing with, is alcohol and minors. So I wanted to show you a music video. It's produced by Plymouth North High School. So it's in Massachusetts. It was produced in Massachusetts. And the man who sings it and wrote the song graduated from Plymouth North High School, and when he was 18, he got in a drinking and driving accident with his best friend. He was at a house party, he was drinking, he got in the car and drove home, and he had his best friend in the car, and he killed his best friend. And he ended up doing jail time. So it not only messed him up on a court level and a legal level with the police, but it also affected his life forever. That friend that he had, his best friend, is no longer around because of a poor decision he made. And that's a reason why we don't want you guys to drink. It's because it could affect not only your life, but somebody else's life. So I'll bring up the... Do you have Wi-Fi? Yeah, it timed out. All right. So, like I said before, he was your age, was doing something he wasn't supposed to be doing. It got him in a lot of trouble. I think you guys will really enjoy this when we get it up and running. Something else that I'm going to talk about, not only alcohol, but other drugs that are common out there right now. So we'll talk about marijuana. We'll talk about prescription pills and heroin, and we'll also talk about ecstasy, or the popular drug that's going around right now associated with ecstasy is Molly. So has anybody heard of Molly? Just wondering. Yeah, you've heard of Molly, so it's getting pretty popular. I didn't hear about Molly until last year. That was the first time I've heard of it. I've dealt with ecstasy a lot at the Comcast Center, at the concerts. And Molly, last year, Molly was the first time I heard of it. So watch this, it's about 3.5 minutes, 4 minutes. And I've been thinking a while, let's just blow this town, just drive away and forget about yesterday. Only got one life to live, only got one heart. You want to stop it and let it work? Okay. So hard to give you. Oh, just press pause and go back to the PowerPoint. Sorry, my fault. The other one timed out. So let's go back to the presentation. So drugs don't care who you are, what what color you are, if you're rich or poor, how old you are, your sex, or where you're from. They don't care if you're a jock, a cheerleader, or a genius. Drugs are an equal opportunity killer. In the news recently, you saw a famous actor died of a heroin overdose. So you think of heroin, you think of junkies that don't have a lot of money, but also rich actors will also be doing that. Crimes related to drug use, so operating under the influence, that's a huge thing. Drinking and driving, but it doesn't just include alcohol. That's why I put operating under the influence. It could be any kind of drug. You can be operating under the influence of marijuana, which we enforce that. So if people are smoking marijuana and driving a car, we can take them out. We can give them field sobriety tests, and they can be arrested for that also. What we're seeing now is a lot of people are operating under the influence of prescription medications, which a lot of the times they're either depressants, antidepressants, opiates, and they can affect the way people drive also. So breaking and entering, drug dealing, stealing, fighting, and killing. So the killing part is more related to the drug dealing, but drugs will kill you too if somebody else does it that's related to drug dealing. I'll get into more specifically about which drugs lead to which crimes, but mostly what we see with what you guys are going to experience as you're going through high school, your freshman year, is peer pressure. The reason why you're being exposed to these things are you're meeting new people, your friends are getting involved with these things, and you're going to be exposed to it from other people. So one of the things we're going to talk about is, later on, is how you're going to deal with peer pressure. So friends have a big influence on what we do and how we act. So this kind of peer pressure that has to do with drugs and alcohol, we call it negative peer pressure. There's two kinds of peer pressure. There's negative and there's positive. So when someone's trying to make you do something that you don't want to do, or that's bad for your health or your well-being, we call that negative peer pressure. Okay, positive peer pressure is a friend trying to get you to go to a study group or play sports with them, or something that's positive that's going to help you become a better person, and not fall into the drugs and alcohol category. So, if you just think about it, a true friend would never put you in a bad situation. So if you have a friend and you're at a party and they ask you to try some alcohol or smoke marijuana or try an ecstasy pill, they're trying to get you to do something that they're already doing that's wrong. They're trying to justify what they're doing by getting other people to do it so that they fit into a group. You don't need to do that, so a true friend wouldn't do that to you. So, another thing I wanted to touch upon was drug and alcohol abuse not only affects you and your bodies, but they affect your families as well. So there's three major things that happen to addicts. And what an addict is, I'll go over that. An addict, there's two forms. There's mental addiction and there's physical addiction. So a physical addiction is your body physically needs a drug. Some people are addicted to alcohol. Some people are addicted to heroin or opiates. And what that physical addiction does to you, your body craves it. You start having sweats, you start shaking, you get sick when you don't have that substance in your body. So an alcoholic is an addict. That's what an alcoholic is. And when they go through withdrawals, they can actually die from withdrawing from the alcohol in their system if they don't get it. But three major things happen to addicts. There's legal trouble, when you get in trouble with the police and the court system. There's the health problems, there's the health effects that come with the drug abuse, and strained family relationships. So you have to think about when you try drugs or alcohol, and it could result to you using them later on like that, it could hurt your family as well. Alright, I'll hold on. We'll go to that movie real quick before we start talking about alcohol.
The doctors know you're responsible. Driving drunk when you lost control. Bottle hop, vodka low. Stop signs are optional. Cops are close, you're not composed. Your eyes are closed. Your light flashes. Highs and lows. Car crashes. Top is froze. Bystanders on the road. Everybody's in silent mode. And the rap scene like a main attraction. Pain and passion from a chain reaction. Cause you been living invincible. Never seeing the truth in lies. Never think the unthinkable. Never think you can ruin lives. Don't never see it through your eyes. You never thought of a massacre. Life's been moving on in the memory of your passenger. And you've been thinking a while. Let's just blow this town. Just drive away and forget about yesterday. We got one life to live. We got one heart to give. I wanna make everything right. So you can come take my keys tonight. You can come take my keys tonight. You were lost, now you're found in that prison confused. Former cynical views became a vision of truth. Consistent abuse is a condition in you. Your last speech was a waste, they don't listen to you. A couple worlds got combined, the collision of two. When they given the shoes, will they consider the rules? Cause the speech that they heard doesn't limit the booze. You could give them the tools, you're never given the credit. So you're back in that cell with these criminal tenants. You got a year and a day, it's a minimal sentence. But that burden is a life that you serve in the night. You're conserving the light, and while you nervously write, you're telling kids what they hate. So it hurts to be right. Now you search and you fight for that person you like. While you live in the past, and you consider the crash a mistake that you made that you'll never get past. Never. And you've been thinking a while. Let's just blow this town. Just drive away and forget about yesterday. We got one life to live. We got one heart to give. I wanna make everything right. So you can come take my keys tonight. You can come take my keys tonight. And you've been thinking a while. Let's just blow this town. Just drive away and forget about yesterday. We got one life to live. We got one heart to give. I wanna make everything right. So you can come take my keys tonight. You can come take my keys tonight. And you've been thinking a while.
So I thought what that man did by making a music video out of it, and now he tours and he does speeches on drinking and driving and using alcohol. I thought that was very, very brave of him to relive his experience every time he goes up there and he talks about how he killed his best friend. In the music video, it's his girlfriend, but in real life, it was his best friend was a guy. They changed stuff, but I think that's really good that he does that now. We'll go over what alcohol is. I'm sure you guys have already been told in health class, probably. Does everybody have this stuff in health class? They teach you about alcohol? Couple? All right. So, it's a depressant. Okay, I'll go over the major things. Loss of motor skills and lack of coordination, headaches, nausea, liver damage, dehydration, aggressiveness, sedation, blood poisoning, cancer, and death. There are so many problems related to alcoholism in the United States right now. And if you start younger, you're more apt to drink when you're older, or drink more, or become an alcoholic. When you're young, when you're a teenager, you're still growing, your hormones are changing, your brain's not fully developed, and then when you put a substance like this in your body, you can become hooked on it very easily. You can become addicted, and you can increase your chances of becoming an alcoholic. So what that can do for you down the road, or right now, you can have, like I talked about, the health problems, the liver damage, cancer, and alcohol makes it, so if you're an athlete also, related to the cancer thing, it keeps your cells from regenerating the way that they're supposed to. So if you're an athlete and you train hard and you want to do well in your sport, if you drink alcohol, you're actually bringing yourself down a notch from your full potential. You'll never reach your full potential putting this substance in your body. Same thing with, your studies in school. Putting alcohol inside your body will affect your memory. It'll affect a lot of different things. And when you're growing up, and your body and your brain still developing, it can cause a lot of problems. So the effects, like you saw in the music video, alcohol-related car crashes are the #1 killer of teenagers in the United States. So that goes to show you why the drinking age is so high also, because when you're young, you don't have the experience necessary, to take part in this activity. That's why they boost the drinking age from 18 to 21, all right? Teens are still drinking, they're still getting in cars, and they're still driving, and people are still dying. Now, we try to tell teenagers, or we try to get the word out as much as possible, but this is not the right thing to do. And that's why I wanted to show you the music video. I kind of wanted to bring it in a different light with someone who's had the experience of drinking and driving and taking his friend's life, and he just didn't affect, his life or his friends. It affected everybody around him. And anybody that knew that person that died was affected. I mean, you could think about how the parents feel, how the siblings feel. Imagine if that was your brother or sister that died in that car accident because they got in the vehicle with someone who drove drunk. Drugs and alcohol contribute to the death of more than 120,000 Americans per year. So you have Mansfield's population is a little bit over 20,000. So you're looking at 6 towns, town of Mansfield, population, people die every year from drugs and alcohol. So you can imagine that, Mansfield times 6. Everybody, died because of that. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how alcohol and minors are arrestable. So what is arrestable with alcohol and minors? First of all, possession. Everybody knows possession. You have alcohol on you, it's arrestable. Transportation. So you'll get to learn this in driver's ed also, but you can't transport alcohol. The only time that a minor can transport alcohol is when they have a parent or a legal guardian in the car. If you're with someone who's 21 years old, but they're not your parent or your legal guardian, then that person operating the vehicle can be arrested for transporting alcohol. So constructive possession, this happens when say you're in a car, say you have a friend that's older, 16, 17 in school, you're in the car with them, you're driving around, there's alcohol in the trunk of the car, they get pulled over, somehow the police officer gets in the trunk, finds the alcohol. Even though you're sitting in the passenger seat, you're going to be arrested also for constructive possession of alcohol. So if it's within the distance of you, you can be charged with it also. All right, so something to keep in mind, that even if you're in the presence of it, you can get in trouble with the police. All right, furnishing alcohol to a minor, also an arrestable offense. So think about that. You could, if a minor asks somebody to buy alcohol for them, then they're not only putting themselves at risk, but they're also putting the person at risk that's buying them the alcohol. So a fake ID, this is something that's very popular right now. I can spot a fake ID pretty well. Right now they come in Massachusetts, see a lot of Pennsylvania, California, and New York fake IDs. And you can buy them online, they're pretty cheap. But what minors don't think about when they buy these fake IDs is that it's a felony. You get caught using a fake ID, you get caught possessing a fake ID, it's a felony. I'm sure everybody here, or mostly everybody, has plans of going to college someday. Any kind of financial aid that's offered you can't get financial aid if you get caught with a fake ID. If you get charged with a felony and you get convicted, there goes any financial aid you were thinking about getting. There goes any scholarships you were thinking about getting if you get convicted of a felony. So a lot of young people that I've seen that use fake IDs don't even think about that until we tell them after we arrest them. So keep that in mind. Don't go on those websites. Don't buy those fake IDs. They don't work. So house parties and a social host law. So in Massachusetts, we have a social host law. If someone has a party where there's alcohol, if the parent's home or the parent's not home, and the police get notified, whether it's a neighbor that called or maybe that person didn't invite someone and they got angry, you can think about that too. If you don't invite somebody, sometimes we've gotten calls from disgruntled friends that weren't invited to a party. If we find out the parents, if they're home or not, can be held responsible if anything happens. They can be liable for any accidents that happen. So if something happens at the house, someone passes out, they get alcohol poisoning from drinking too much alcohol, so their blood alcohol concentration is too high and they can't maintain consciousness, they go to the hospital. The parents of that teenager that went to the hospital want to civilly sue whoever owns the property, they can do that. That's also, that goes in the same thing for drinking and driving accidents. Somebody wanders off the property. You know, in Rentham there was a girl that was at a house party and she walked out the back door into a swamp and it was cold outside and she never made it out of the swamp. That was it. She died of hypothermia because she was too intoxicated to find her way out. So the social host law, that would allow the parents of that girl to sue the other parents, and it could cost them their home, cost them their life savings, it could cost them everything. And they can also be charged criminally. So that's something else to think of. If a minor has a house party, it's just not the minor that's going to get in trouble, it's also whoever owns the property, whoever's the parent. Okay? So, that's huge. That just went into effect a couple of years ago. So, if a minor gets caught with alcohol, their license will get suspended for an automatic 90 days through the Registry of Motor Vehicles, even though it's not a motor vehicle related offense. If the police officer puts in for it, they can get the license suspended for up to 3 months. And then the other thing that can happen with minors that we see a lot, especially at the Comcast Center, is protective custody. So what protective custody means is that you're so intoxicated you can't take care of yourself. We've seen people, or minors, stumbling down drunk, can't talk, can't walk, throwing up. I've asked somebody to punch in their passcode for their phone. They can't even remember what their code for their phone is, so I can call their parents, so I can't even call their parents. That's how intoxicated some of these people can be. And we have to place them into protective custody. So we take care of, people who are too intoxicated to take care of themselves. So that can also happen from drinking too much and having an experience with alcohol that usually minors have. So marijuana. This is an interesting topic right now because it's recently been decriminalized. So they list it as both a depressant and a hallucinogen. Long-term effects, cell abnormalities, impaired vision, speech, loss of memory, lack of mental focus, mood swings, lung cancer. So what they're coming out with now is some scientific evidence to why. I'll talk about the penalties first. But since it's not a criminal offense anymore, it's a civil offense. So it's a civil infraction. So we just write out tickets if it's under 1 ounce. In the town of Mansfield, the citation is $300. So minors get caught with marijuana, the ticket goes to the minor, but the parents are responsible for it. So that's also something you have to think about. Your family's also affected if you get caught with something like this. Criminal infraction is possession over 1 ounce or any amount for distribution. So marijuana is arrestable for anything over 1 ounce, or if you have it individually packaged for sale. If you have a scale with you, you have a list of people who owe you money. That's all arrestable, and it's still criminal. So not including, like I said, letting down your family and your friends. So if someone got arrested for marijuana over 1 ounce or distributing it, then, or any drug for that matter, or getting caught with alcohol, you have to face your family at the end of this. So if you were to put yourself in someone's shoes that got arrested, you could just think about the aftermath that you get from your family, from your mother, your father, your grandparents. You'd be ashamed, right? If they had to come pick you up at the police station, who would want to make that phone call to mom or dad? I know a lot of people that wouldn't. That's not a phone call that mom or dad would want to get either. So this is what I thought was interesting. These are new studies on marijuana use in teens. So it's going to affect long-term how your memory stores information and cognitive abilities, how you're going to perform tasks in the future. So what they've noticed is scientists report that teens who smoke marijuana almost daily for 3 years had abnormal changes in their brain structure. So marijuana actually changes how your brain looks. And they know this by giving people MRIs and CAT scans who've been smoking marijuana and people who haven't. And they've been comparing the two, and they've been saying, hold on, wait a second. So marijuana is not safe. It's actually changing the makeup of the brain. Now in teenagers, like I said before, you're growing, your hormones are changing, your brain's developing. It's not fully developed yet. And marijuana is having a direct effect on the brain. So when you see the hippie stoners from the 70s that are 50, 60, years old now, and they walk and talk like they're stoned all the time, even though they're not. It's because they started smoking earlier, and it's gone with them the rest of their life. Now, how is that fair to yourself? If you're not even giving yourself a fair chance to become a model citizen, somebody who's going to do well in school, and you want to do well in school so you can do well in life afterwards. If teenagers start doing this young, you're already shooting yourself in the foot before you even get started. That's what I view this study as. So even after they stopped smoking and were tested years later, they still exhibited the symptoms. So that's something to think about, which I thought was really interesting. This just came out in December, so this is really new research that you have to think about when somebody asks you if you want to smoke a joint or smoke a bowl or eat some brownies or something. This is gonna affect you later on. So every time you do this, you're gonna be changing your brain structure, how your brain works, how you think, how you store information, how your memory works. And that's going to affect how you do on your tests, how you do on a job interview down the road, how you're going to do in college. These are things that as young people, you guys really don't think about. It's really tough growing up nowadays. You have a lot of issues that, we didn't have when I was growing up, and that was, when I was in your shoes, that was 15 years ago. That wasn't too far away. So I didn't have to worry about a lot of the things that you guys are worrying about today. But that's why I'm educating you. I'm just giving you the information, and you can make, an educated decision based on the information I'm going to give you. So, raises alarms as to teenagers becoming adults and being able to function at higher levels necessary to organize their lives and work in our society. So when you go to school, when you come here to church, you know, you're trying to make yourself better. We want you to fit in this society. We want you to become a working member of society, someone who's going to make everybody else around them better. And this is something that is going to hinder your chances of doing that. So the main thing I'd like to talk about is heroin. We're having a really bad problem with it in the police department right now. We're seeing a lot more of it. We've seen more heroin in the past couple months than in the 8 years I've been in the police department. So you see it on the news, people are dying. Just in Attleboro, I think they had 7 overdoses last month. And usually the drug world, the police department doesn't see too much because obviously people who use drugs don't talk to the police very much. The only time we talk to heroin users or junkies is when they start overdosing and when they need medical help. And then that's when we show up and we investigate and we find out what's going on. These are the different types of heroin that they have. There's black heroin, brown heroin, white heroin, and there's black tar. Black heroin is unrefined. That means you're getting all the junk left over from the process. And the white heroin and the brown heroin, that's not heroin all the time. That can be, what they call it is cutting drugs. So in order to enhance their profit, they'll split up the drugs, and they'll either mix it with anything from flour to meth or cocaine. They call that a speedball. That's what kills a lot of people. And they're finding out now that when they're cutting this stuff, they're putting in these drugs. The users don't know what they're getting, and then they're overdosing and they're dying. I hear it's pretty prevalent in all the towns around here, including Mansfield. So it starts out occasional user, say 4 times a week, just like it says, social, recreational. You know, a lot of it starts out with peer pressure. That's where the social and recreational part comes from. Regular, 1 to 2 times a day, and you need other drugs to supplement. So you'd be probably smoking marijuana, using alcohol, and an addict 4 to 6 times a day. I can't even imagine sticking a needle in my arm up to 6 times a day. So where does it come from? So it's an opiate-derived drug like morphine. So morphine's a legal version of it. 90% of the illegal opium is produced in Afghanistan in the poppy fields. A lot of the military guys that are still over there right now are eradicating as many of these as they can, but they're everywhere. And essentially when someone buys heroin or they buy any kind of opium, they're directly funding terrorism. This is going right back to the Taliban, and they're using it to fund terrorism. That's something to think about. These are pictures, before and after pictures, when people start using heroin. Now this could either be, I don't have the dates on how long she's been using it, but it could be anywhere from a couple months to get like that to a couple of years, depending on the heavy usage. So you can see with this guy, 7 months later. So what we usually see a lot with the picking, you can see all the scabs on his face and the red marks. Heroin users, when they get high, they feel like bugs are crawling on their skin. They feel like that there's something underneath their skin and they have to get at it. They constantly pick and scratch and move around, and they just, it's a gross feeling, and he doesn't look that bad compared to some of the people I've arrested that have had heroin on. Other signs of heroin use, people get the nods. They look like they're gonna fall asleep right after they shoot up. So if you're sitting next to somebody, say you're at a bus stop, and you just see someone just start nodding off, they probably just shot up or they took opium. So they're probably some kind of heroin addict that's hooked on some kind of opium derived drug or painkiller. So what we usually see and what I've seen with dealing with people who are on heroin, I've had a parent come to me one time. She was very distraught. She didn't know what to do. Her son had been stealing her checks and writing checks out to himself at $300 to $600 a pop out of her checking account. So his problem is typical for heroin addicts that need money to get their fix, because trying to shoot up 4 to 6 times a day costs money. If you're a heroin addict, you probably can't hold a job, and if you can't hold a job, you don't have any money, so you have to get it from somewhere else. So usually we see this start when someone first starts heroin or they become addicted to a drug. They start stealing from parents and family members, money, a little bit at a time, like out of a wallet or the purse, or they start stealing jewelry out of mom's jewelry case or her drawers, start pawning things. Parents will know something's going on. They'll confront the heroin addict, they'll ask them, they'll talk to them about it. Heroin addicts become very good liars. They want to mask their addiction. They don't want anybody to think anything's going on with them or that will interrupt their addiction, because there's only one thing going on in their mind, and that's getting high. They're not thinking about school, they're not thinking about making themselves better, they're not thinking about their sports. They got one thing on their mind, and that's get my fix. So what we see from that, they lie to the parents. Sometimes parents will let it slide. Maybe there isn't a problem, maybe they're just imagining something. Then they figure it out later on, and they confront them again when things like the checkbooks start missing, or the checks are being written out to, their child, which I've seen, which this woman came in and was complaining to me about. And she told me that she found the black substance that you saw on there, the black tar, in the basement where he usually hangs out and watches TV with his friends. She found it. He told her it was hash, like marijuana, hashish. And she thought nothing of it. Didn't smell like marijuana, didn't look like marijuana, but she took his word for it and thought, oh, marijuana is not an issue, so I won't worry about it. Ended up being black tar heroin. And I had her bring it in for me to show me. And that's when we started getting the ball rolling to get him some help. So this step right now that families would take after seeing this, they would either, and this is how heroin can affect your family life, they would either get them help, put them in a detox and a rehab, or they'd kick them out of the house. This mother wanted to get her son help, so she put him in a detox. With the help of me, I had to hold charges over his head. I had to hold criminal charges for forgery of checks for the money that he stole, which is felony charges, which could have landed him in jail for a while. And he was afraid of going, so he went into detox instead of going to jail. A lot of heroin addicts won't go into detox or rehab if they don't have to, because they can't get the drugs that they need while they're in there. So he was under some duress, from me. I had to do my job, and I knew that this was the best way how to convince him to try to get help. He went into the detox and rehab, and he's been clean for almost 2 years now, but he still lives, he doesn't live at home because he had such a bad addiction. He has to live in these halfway houses where he lives with other addicts, and they meet with counseling groups to keep him from falling off the wagon, from going back and back to the habit. So he had to get out of town where he had drug dealing friends, and he had to get away from them, and he had to distance himself from, not only his friends, but his family. All his family was here, and he couldn't come back because he knew that he was too weak, and he would just get thrown back in the mix. This is the kind of grip heroin can have once you start using. So if a heroin addict doesn't get help, or if they don't go to jail for their problem, there's a good chance they're going to start overdosing and they're going to start dying. What we see is when heroin addicts do stop, if they go to a detox for a little while, they get it out of their system, they get back out, they go back home with the friends that they were using with, they end up shooting up again, and they started off with the same kind of dose that they had before, thinking that they could handle it. Because their tolerance was built up so much before from using so often, they thought that they could handle it. So they end up overdosing. And a lot of the times, we see them die. I had a friend from high school. He was a nice kid. He was on the hockey team. And he was a heroin addict, and he abused prescription pills. I went to a call for an erratic operator about 3 or 4 years ago, and ended up being behind the Home Depot in Mansfield. So, very close. This is stuff that happens in town. It's a real thing. When I got there, the kid that I knew from high school was blue. He had stopped breathing. He had shot up with heroin. He was in the passenger seat, so the driver hadn't shot up yet, but they had pulled back there because the driver didn't want to get in trouble because his friend just died in the passenger seat next to him. So it's kind of strange when you talk to somebody a week or two before, and then the next time you see them, they're totally blue and they're not breathing because they have a bad drug habit. And he started out not doing heroin, but in high school, he was a big partier. He was drinking a lot, he was smoking a lot of marijuana. Some people say marijuana isn't a gateway drug. Well, for this individual, they were. And from there, he went on to prescription pills, taking Ritalin pills and Xanax, and then that wasn't doing it for him, so he started using oxys. And then when oxys became too expensive, he started using heroin. And we were lucky that day that the paramedics were able to get there fast enough that they used Narcan, and it brought him back to life. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. He was dead right in front of me. Brought him in the ambulance. A couple minutes later, he's up and talking again. So what the Narcan does is it stops the opiates from entering your cells right away. It blocks them from entering, and it kills the high totally. And it can bring somebody back to life that's basically dead. So fast forward, that was about 3 or 4 years ago. Just 6 months ago, he died of an overdose. The paramedics weren't able to get there, and he died overdosing on heroin. And that's something, when you think about when you start, or when you're pressured to start using substances like this, because it probably will happen. I don't think everybody will be exposed to heroin, but for things like alcohol and marijuana, you have to think about long-term effects. Just not short-term, I have to be popular with my social group or at the party, but what is this going to do, to me long-term in my family? How is this going to affect my family? His parents were the parents that didn't bring him to a detox and a rehab. They put it in the back of their mind that he has a problem, and they just let him keep doing whatever he wanted. And it was years of abuse that finally led to his death using using prescription drugs and heroin. So once you're an addict, you're always an addict. So, like I was saying before, he started getting hooked on prescription pills, oxys and perks, painkillers. They're opiate derived, so same thing, they come from the poppy plant, which contains opium, the ingredient that makes the addicts get that high, that rush that they're always looking to achieve. And it's highly addictive. When an addict first tries, or when a heroin user first tries heroin, the next time that they're trying it, they're always trying to get that high all over again. That first high that they got them hooked. They're always searching for that high. So they're always using more and more. And that's why you see them using 4 to 6 times a day and possibly larger doses. But they'll never achieve that first high that they had. So OxyContin. So this is what's making heroin popular right now. Heroin is very cheap. It's the same drug as what's in OxyContins. Now, people think that pills are safer because they're in pill form. You know what you're getting, but they're not. They get you hooked on drugs. You get dependent on them. The 40 milligrams, they can go for $40 a pill. A bag of heroin that I showed you earlier, that can go for $6 to $10 minimum. So when people get hooked on these opium-derived drugs, they look for the cheapest fix. And if, like I said before, if you're an addict, you're not going to be able to hold down a job. The only thing you're going to think about is that next fix. So 5 to 10 years ago, prescription painkillers only cost, like say, $5 a pill. Now they're up to 40 or even 80. When pills quadruple in prices, addicts couldn't afford them anymore and switched to cheaper fix. Now the other thing, I asked if people have heard of Molly. That's a big thing coming up now. They're seeing a lot of emergency room visits with Molly. So what you see in ecstasy, or it's called MDMA, or Molly, is the big things is the increased heart rate and the dehydration. So when you see somebody who's under the influence of ecstasy or Molly, you'll see them with pacifiers in their mouth. Does anybody know why they have pacifiers? Anybody think about it? Because they grind their teeth. So when they're high on Molly, they constantly grind their teeth and they put the pacifier in their mouth to keep them from grinding their teeth down. So that sounds pretty nasty to me. And also, your blood pressure goes up, your core body temperature goes up, and you can become dehydrated, and you can overheat, and you can actually die from that. So that's the biggest thing that we see from Molly. So there's the powder form. Pill form usually has characters on it. So just be careful with Molly. So signs a friend may have a problem. So you can take this into consideration if somebody stops talking to you, or they lose interest in certain activities or sports. This is something to keep an eye out for that maybe you can help them with, or ask them, or tell an adult. So I've been going for a long time now. So this is what my mother always told me. God gave you a brain, and it's up to you to use it. I hope I gave you some decent information tonight that you can use to make educated decisions on yourself. I mean, I can only tell you what's out there, and I hope that that you guys learned something tonight. Does anybody have any questions for me about anything, about ecstasy, about heroin, marijuana laws, alcohol, drinking and driving, anything like that? I'll be around for a little bit if you want to ask me any questions. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, I think it's a lot of information. Probably you've heard it. Thing that I was telling Officer earlier is, why are we doing this here in church? That would be a great presentation for at the high school. And I think it'd be wonderful to hear that at the high school. We're doing it here because it fits into what we've been talking about the past couple of months about respect. Respect for others, respect for yourself, respect for the gift of life that God has given to you. So it all does still come back to our understanding of the faith. So anything that happens out in the world isn't separate from the faith that we profess and we try to live, that you've been formed and shaped in. So just keep that in mind, that faith isn't just something you plug into on Sunday or religious ed classes, but it's something that now you as young people ready to be confirmed are called to go into the world and to influence that world by the values, by the faith that is at the foundation of your life. And please keep in mind, and this has happened before, and I can offer it anyhow for a few more months. I've told young persons before, and they've taken me up on it. If ever you come into a situation that you're not in a safe situation, party, or you've crossed the line, pick up the phone, call the rectory, get the emergency line, and that goes right to my phone. And I mean that. I can only do that now for another 5 months here. But while I'm here, I want to extend that invitation to all of you. Pick up a phone, call a parent. Yeah, maybe they'll yell initially, but they really do want to help you. And I've dealt with too many parents who have said to me, if only they had called me. So please keep that in mind, okay? Because again, we're all here because we love you, because we care for you, and we want you to grow up to be the best potential that God has given to you. Mr. Benson.
A couple quick announcements. Thank you, Officer Townsend, for coming to speak with us today. Teachers, we were passing out during the talk, so some of you got them, some of you didn't. There's some questions to discuss in the classroom afterwards. So, you're in the center here, we can't reach you. I have those. And then just a personal touch to the story. I have a dear cousin. Her name is Katie. We grew up down the street from each other. We were born 16 days apart, went to school together, all the way through, graduated from high school together. We did everything together. We were as close as cousins can be. I'm closer to her than I am to my sisters. One thing that we shared, which we wish we didn't share, her dad passed away from cancer a month and a half after my dad passed away from cancer. They both died from cancer actually 13 days before their birthdays. It was super creepy how connected we were. Very traumatizing experience and tough experience for both of us. I took my hurt and my pain and my anger, and I turned to God into the church. She took her hurt and her pain and anger and turned towards marijuana. And then that wasn't enough. And then it led to heroin. She started stealing from her mom, broke into the house, so it would seem like someone else would steal. Pawning stuff, sold from family members, sold from me, and then OD'd on heroin. Luckily, the paramedics were able to keep her from dying, but ended up in jail for almost a year. Then was in detox for a while, and now is thankfully on the road to recovery. But two different, very, very different paths that we can take in our lives when something bad happens, or when we're hurting, when we're struggling with something. We can turn towards the support of friends, family members, the church, God, or we can try to find comfort in other ways. Relationships, drugs, alcohol. So please, hopefully you will turn to the former rather than the latter, that you will turn to those people that are there to help you and they care about you and love you, and not